Hello and welcome to Written Words. I'm Helen, and in this video I'm going to share a little bit of my own work, not my own writing but my translation. I'm going to share my translation of a short story. It's from my collection Sentimental Tales, which explores the work of the 18th and 19th century Russian author Nikolai Karamzin. Among many other things, he wrote short stories in the sentimentalist style. He travelled widely around Western Europe and was very familiar with the sentimentalist writers of that time, such as Laurence Sterne, Rousseau, Solomon Gessner, and many others. And he was heavily influenced by them. So this book contains 4 of Karamzin's stories, as well as 4 other stories by people who either influenced Karamzin or were influenced by him. So the story that I'm going to share is the one that set the whole thing off. It started as a project just for fun to translate this little story, Poor Liza, which was given to me as a birthday present many years ago when I was 19. And it was one of the first Russian books I read all by myself. I was very proud of myself, even though it is only about 5,000 words long. It's a beautiful, melodramatic story about a young couple who fall in love, but things don't go quite as they should. So here is my translation of Poor Liza by Nikolai Mikhailovich Karamzin. It is possible that no one living in Moscow knows the city as well as I do. Since no one is out and about as much as I, no one wanders around on foot more than I do, without a plan, aimlessly, wherever the fancy takes me, through meadows and groves, over hills and plains. Every summer I find new and delightful places, or new beauty in old ones. The place which I find most pleasant of all, however, is where the sombre Gothic towers of the Simonov monastery stand tall. From atop that hill you can see almost all of Moscow to your right, a terrible mass of houses and churches which presents itself to the eyes in the form of a majestic amphitheatre, a marvellous scene, especially when the sun shines upon it, the evening light glowing on the countless golden cupolas and crosses ascending to the heavens. Down below stretch rich, lush green meadows of flowers, and beyond them, bordered by yellow sands, flows a gleaming river, stirred up by the gentle oars of fishing boats, or churned beneath the rudders of the laden river vessels which sail from the fertile lands of the Russian Empire to supply greedy Moscow with grain. On the other side of the river there is a grove of oak trees, near which a large flock of sheep grazes. Sitting in the shade of the trees, young shepherds sing mournful songs and while away the summer days, which, for them, are all the same. A little further away, among the dense greenery of ancient elms, glimmers the golden-domed Danilov monastery, and beyond that, almost on the edge of the horizon, is the bluish hue of Sparrow Hills. To the left lie vast fields of wheat, woodlands, 3 or 4 villages, and in the distance the Kolomenskaya estate with its lofty palace. I am a frequent visitor to this place, and I almost always welcome in the spring here. I also come in the sombre days of autumn to grieve with nature. The winds howl terribly within the walls of the deserted monastery, among the overgrown graves and in the dark passages alongside the cells. There, as I lean on the ruins of the gravestones, I listen to the muffled groan of a time that has been swallowed by the abyss of the past, a groan which makes my heart shudder and tremble. Sometimes I go inside the cells and imagine those who once lived there. Such mournful scenes. Here I see a grey-haired elderly monk kneeling before a crucifix and praying for a speedy release from his earthly bonds, as all the pleasure has gone from his life and his feelings have faded away, apart from pain and weakness. Over there, a young brother, pale-faced and with a weary gaze, is looking through the grill on the window at a field, where he sees happy birds swimming freely in the sea of air. He watches them, and he sheds bitter tears. He languishes, withers, and shrivels. Then the dismal ringing of the bells informs me of his untimely death. Sometimes at the gates of the church I contemplate the mural depicting the miracles which have taken place in this monastery. In one place fish fall from the sky to feed the inhabitants of the monastery as it is besieged by numerous enemies. In another, the image of the Mother of God is causing enemies to flee. This all reminds me of the history of our fatherland, the sad story of those times when fierce Tatars and Lithuanians laid waste to the area around the Russian capital with fire and sword, and when unfortunate Moscow, like a defenceless widow, turned to God alone for help at times of such terrible disaster. However, what draws me most often to the walls of the Simonov monastery is my recollection of Liza's sorry fate. Poor Liza! Ah, how I love those subjects which touch my heart and cause me to shed tears of tender sorrow. 70 sazhens, or a couple of 100 yards, from the monastery walls near a birch grove, in the middle of a green meadow, stands an empty hut with no door, windows, or floor, and whose roof has long since rotted and collapsed. It was in this hut, some 30 or so years ago, that the lovely, good-natured Liza lived with her elderly mother. Liza's father had been a relatively prosperous peasant, since he loved work, tilled the land well, and led a wholly sober life. Soon after his death, though, his wife and daughter became destitute. Their lazy hired hand was a poor labourer in the fields, so the wheat no longer flourished. They were compelled to rent out their land for a mere pittance. What was more, the poor widow, who wept almost constantly over the death of her husband — even peasants know how to love — became ever frailer with each passing day and could not work at all. Only Liza, who was 15 years old when her father departed, worked alone day and night, regardless of her tender youth and rare beauty, weaving canvases, knitting stockings, gathering flowers in the spring and berries in the summer, and selling them in Moscow. The sensitive, kind old woman, seeing how exhausted her daughter was, often clasped the girl to her feebly beating heart and called her divine mercy, a breadwinner and comfort in her old age, and implored God to reward her for all that she had done for her mother. "God gave me hands that I might work," Liza said. "You fed me from your own breast and looked after me when I was a child, and now my turn has come to look after you. Do not grieve and weep. Our tears will not bring my father back." Nevertheless, gentle Liza herself frequently struggled to hold back her own tears. She remembered, alas, that she had once had a father, and that he had passed away. But in order to console her mother, she tried to conceal the sorrow in her heart and appear calm and happy. "I will cry no more, my dear Liza," the grief-stricken old woman replied, "when I am in the next world. They say that everyone will be happy there. I will probably find happiness when I see your father. I do not wish to die yet, though. What would become of you without me? With whom could I leave you? No, God willing, you must be comfortably settled first of all. Perhaps we will find a kind man soon. Then, having given my blessing to both of you, my dear children, I will make the sign of the cross and rest in peace in the damp earth." 2 years had passed since the death of Liza's father. The meadows were filled with flowers, and Liza arrived in Moscow carrying lilies of the valley. In the street she happened upon a young, well-dressed gentleman of kindly appearance. She showed him the flowers and blushed. "Are you selling these, young lady?" he asked with a smile. "Yes, I am," she replied. "How much would you like for them?" 5 kopecks. "That's too cheap. Here's a rouble." Surprised, Liza dared to look up at the young man. Then she blushed even more, and looking down at the ground, told him she couldn't accept a rouble. "Why ever not?" "I do not need more." "Well, I think that beautiful lilies of the valley, hand-picked by a beautiful girl, are worth a rouble. But since you will not take it, here are your 5 kopecks. I would like to always buy your flowers. Pick them only for me." Liza gave him the flowers, took the 5 kopecks, curtsied, and was about to go, but the stranger took her by the arm to stop her. "Where are you going, young lady?" "Home." "Where is your home?" Liza told him where she lived, and then left. The young man did not attempt to detain her, perhaps because passers-by were stopping to look and sneer at them. When Liza arrived home, she told her mother what had happened. "You were right not to accept the rouble. He might be a bad man." "Oh no, mother, I do not think so. He had such a kind face, and his voice. In any case, Liza, it is best to feed oneself through the fruits of one's own labours and not accept charity. My dear, you have no idea how evil people may harm a poor young woman. My heart lurches every time you go into the city. I always light a candle in front of the icon and pray to the Lord God to preserve you from all trouble and misfortune." Liza's eyes filled with tears, and she kissed her mother. The next day Liza picked the very best lilies of the valley and took them once again into the city. Her eyes silently cast around, searching. Many people wanted to buy her flowers, but she replied that they were not for sale, and looked this way and that. Evening came, when she must return home, and the flowers were tossed into the Moskva river. "You belong to no one," said Liza, feeling such sadness in her heart. The following evening Liza was seated by the window, spinning and singing plaintive songs in a soft voice, when she suddenly leapt up and exclaimed, "Oh!" The young stranger was standing beneath the window. "What's the matter?" asked Liza's startled mother, who was sitting nearby. "Nothing, mother," Liza replied timidly. "It's just that I saw him." "Whom?" "The gentleman who bought my flowers." The old woman looked out of the window. The young man bowed to her so courteously and with such a pleasant air that she could only think good of him. "Greetings, dear old lady," he said. "I am very tired. I don't suppose you have any fresh milk, do you?" Liza, being obliging and not waiting for her mother's response, perhaps because she already knew what it would be, ran to the cellar and brought back a clean jug covered with a spotless wooden lid. Then she reached for a glass, rinsed it, dried it with a towel, filled it up, and handed it through the window, her eyes downcast all the while. The stranger drank, and nectar from the hands of Hebe could not have seemed sweeter to him. As anyone might suppose, he thanked Liza afterwards, and not only with words, but also with his eyes. Meanwhile, the kind-hearted older woman told him all about her grief and consolation, about the death of her husband, and her daughter's endearing virtues, such as her conscientiousness, gentleness, and so on. He listened attentively to her, but his eyes were, well, need I say where? As for Liza, timid Liza glanced occasionally at the young man, but swifter than lightning which flashes then disappears behind a cloud, her blue eyes looked back down at the ground as soon as they encountered his gaze. "I would be much obliged," he told her mother, "if your daughter did not sell her handiwork to anyone but me. That way she would not need to go into the city so frequently, and you would not have to be separated from her. I could come to your house from time to time." At that, Liza's eyes shone with joy, which she tried in vain to hide. Her cheeks glowed like the sunset on a clear summer's evening as she looked at her left sleeve, clutching it with her right hand. The old woman eagerly accepted this offer, not suspecting anything untoward, and she assured the stranger that the linen woven by Liza, as well as the stockings she knitted, were especially good and harder wearing than any others. It was growing dark, and the young man was preparing to leave. "What should we call you, dear kind sir?" asked the old woman. "My name is Erast," he replied. "Erast," Liza said softly. "Erast." She repeated the name 5 times as if trying to commit it to memory. Erast bade them farewell, then left. Liza followed him with her eyes, while her mother sat lost in thought until, taking her daughter by the hand, the old woman said, "Ah, Liza, how good and kind he is! If only you could have a husband like that." Liza's heart was all aflutter. Mother, mother, how could that be? He is a gentleman, and among peasants—" Liza never finished her sentence. At this point the reader should know that this young man, Erast, was a rather rich nobleman, of reasonable intellect and with a good heart, which, although kind by nature, was also weak and fickle. He led an indulgent lifestyle, thinking only of his own pleasure and seeking it in worldly amusements, but frequently not finding it, resulting in his feeling bored and complaining about his lot. Liza's beauty had made an impression on his heart from their first meeting. He read novels and idylls, possessed a somewhat lively imagination, and often transported himself in his thoughts to bygone days, real or otherwise, where, if the poets are to be believed, everyone wandered carefree through meadows, bathed in pure springs, kissed like turtle doves, relaxed beneath rose bushes and myrtles, and spent all of their days in joyous idleness. It seemed to him that he had found in Liza that which his heart had long been seeking. Nature is calling me into its embrace and to its pure joys, he thought, and resolved, for a while at least, to abandon high society. Let us return to Liza. Night was drawing in, so the mother blessed her daughter and wished her sweet dreams. But this time her wish did not come true. Liza did not sleep well at all. A new visitor to her heart, the image of Erast, presented itself so vividly that she woke up almost every minute, opening her eyes and sighing. Liza rose before the sun, walked out onto the banks of the Moskva River, sat down on the grass, and filled with melancholy gazed at the white mists which swirled in the air and then lifted, leaving sparkling drops on nature's green carpet. Silence reigned all around. Soon, though, the rising luminary of the daytime roused all of creation. The groves and bushes came to life, birds flitted about and began to sing, and flowers raised their heads to drink in the life-giving rays of light. Liza, however, remained seated, still full of sadness. "Oh, Liza, Liza, what has happened to you? You used to wake with the birds, rejoicing with them at the morning, and your pure, joyful soul would shine in your eyes just as the sun shines in the drops of heavenly dew. But now you are pensive, and your heart does not know nature's joy." Meanwhile, a young shepherd was herding his flock along the river bank and playing on his pipe. Liza watched him intently and thought, "Ah, if only the man who is occupying my thoughts had been born a simple peasant or a shepherd. And if only it was he who was driving his flock past me right now. Oh, how I would curtsy to him with a smile and greet him, saying, 'Hello, dear shepherd, where are you taking your sheep? There is green grass for your sheep here, as well as red flowers that you can use to make a garland for your hat.' He would gaze tenderly at me and perhaps even take my hand. But that is just a dream." The shepherd, still playing his pipe, walked on by and disappeared with his motley flock behind a nearby hill. Suddenly Liza heard the sound of oars. Glancing at the river, she saw a boat, and in the boat was Erast. Blood began to rush through every vein in her body, but not out of fear, of course. She stood up and tried to walk, but could not. Erast leapt out onto the bank, approached Liza, and her dreams partly came true, as he gazed tenderly at her and took her by the hand. Meanwhile, Liza stood there with downcast eyes, her cheeks burning and her heart fluttering, unable to withdraw her hand or turn away when he approached her with his rose-coloured lips. Ah! So ardently did he kiss her that the whole universe seemed to be on fire. "Dear Liza," said Erast, "dear Liza, I love you." These words resounded in the depths of her soul like rapturous heavenly music, so that she could scarcely believe her ears, and... At this point I will set aside my paintbrush. I will merely say that, in that moment of rapture, Liza's shyness vanished. Erast knew that he was loved passionately by a new, pure and open heart. They sat on the grass in such a way that there was little space between them, gazing into each other's eyes and saying, "Love me," and 2 hours passed in an instant. Eventually, Liza realised that her mother might be worried about her. It was time to part. "Oh, Erast," she said, "will you always love me?" "Always, my dear Liza, always," he replied. "Can you swear it?" "Yes, I can, dear Liza, I can." "No, there is no need for oaths. I believe you, Erast, I do. Why would you deceive poor Liza? Surely that could never be." "Never, never, dear Liza." "I am so happy, and my mother will be overjoyed too when she finds out that you love me." "Oh no, Liza, there is no need to tell her anything." "Why not?" "Old people can be suspicious. She might imagine something terrible." "That would not happen." "Still, I beg you not to tell her a word about this." "Very well, I will do as you say, although I do not like to keep secrets from her." They bade each other farewell, kissed, and promised one last time to meet every evening, whether on the river bank, in the birch grove, or somewhere near Liza's home, just as long as they always saw each other. Liza went away, but her eyes turned back 100 times to look at Erast, who was still standing on the bank and watching as she departed. Liza returned to her hut in quite a different state to that in which she had left. On her face and in all her movements there was heartfelt joy. "He loves me," she thought with delight. "Oh, dearest mamma," Liza said to her mother, who had only just woken up. "Oh, dearest mamma, it is such a wonderful morning. It is so joyful out in the fields. The larks have never sung so well, the sun has never shone so brightly, and the flowers have never smelled so lovely." Propping herself up with a walking stick, the old woman went out into the meadow to enjoy the morning that Liza had described so prettily and colourfully. It was indeed, she discovered, particularly pleasant. Her sweet daughter had cheered up all of nature with her own happiness. "Ah, Liza," she said, "how good is the work of our Almighty God! For nearly 60 years I have lived on this earth, and I still never tire of looking upon the Lord's creation, at the pure sky like a huge canopy, and at the ground which is covered with new grass and flowers every year. The King of Heaven must surely have loved humanity when he chose this world for us. Oh, Liza, who would ever want to die were it not for the occasional grief that comes our way? Clearly it is essential. We might forget our souls if we never shed any tears." But Liza thought, "Ah, I would sooner forget my soul than forget my beloved." After that, Erast and Liza, for fear of not keeping their word, met every evening, when Liza's mother had gone to bed, sometimes on the river bank or among the silver birches, but most often in the shade of the 100-year-old oaks, 80 or so sazhens from the hut. These oak trees overshadowed a deep pond of pure water, which had been dug out in ancient times. There the quiet moon would often shine its silver beams through the green branches and onto Liza's fair hair, where the winds played along with the hand of her sweetheart. These same moonbeams would frequently light up the glimmering tears of love which always appeared in Liza's gentle eyes when Erast kissed her. They embraced, but chaste, shy Cynthia had no need to hide away from them behind a cloud, since their embraces were pure and innocent. "When you," Liza said to Erast, "when you tell me I love you, my dearest, and when you clasp me to your heart and gaze at me with your adorable eyes, then I feel so good that I forget myself. I forget everything except Erast. It is wonderful. It is a marvel, my love, that I was able to live so peacefully and happily without knowing you. Now I cannot comprehend it, because life without you would not be life, but sadness and tedium. Without your eyes the bright moon is dark. Without your voice the song of the nightingale is dull. Without your breath the breeze is intolerable." Erast delighted in his shepherdess, as he called Liza, and seeing how much she loved him made him feel even more admirable. All the glittering amusements of high society paled into insignificance in comparison with the pleasures with which this passionate friendship with an innocent soul filled his heart. It was with disgust that he thought about the despicable wantonness in which he had formerly indulged his senses. I will live with Liza as a brother with a sister, he thought. I will not abuse her love, and I will be forever happy. Foolish young man, do you not know your own heart? Do you always take responsibility for your actions? Does reason always govern your emotions? Liza demanded that Erast visit her mother often. I love her, she said, and I wish her well, and I think that seeing you would bring pleasure to anyone. The old woman really was pleased to see him. She loved to talk to him about her late husband and about her younger days, how she met her dear Ivan, how he loved her with such love, and how she had agreed to live with him. Ah, we never tired of gazing at each other until the moment when cruel death knocked him off his feet. He died in my arms. Erast listened to her with unfeigned pleasure. He bought Liza's handiwork from her and offered to pay 10 times more than the price that was asked. But the old woman would never take more than was owed. Several weeks passed in this way. One evening Erast waited a long time for Liza to arrive. Eventually she came, but she was so unhappy that he was afraid. Her eyes were red from crying. "Liza, Liza, what has happened to you?" "Ah, Erast, I have been crying." "Why, what is the matter?" "I must tell you everything. A young man, the son of a rich peasant from a nearby village, is trying to win my affection. Mother wants me to marry him." "Will you say yes?" "You are so cruel. How can you ask such a thing? I feel sorry for my mother. She keeps crying and saying that I do not care about her peace of mind, and that she will worry herself to death if she cannot marry me off. Ah, my mother does not know what a dear companion you are to me." Erast kissed Liza, saying that her happiness was dearer to him than anything on earth, and that when her mother died, he would take Liza with him and live with her inseparably, in a village deep in the middle of the forest, as if in paradise. "But you cannot be my husband," Liza said, sighing softly. "Why not?" "I am a peasant." "You offend me. What matters most to your beloved is a sensitive, innocent soul, and Liza will always be closest to my heart." She threw herself into his arms, and at that moment purity was set to perish. Erast sensed an unusual stirring in his blood. Never had Liza seemed so charming as she did now. Never had her caresses had such a powerful effect on him. Never had her kisses seemed so ardent. She knew nothing, suspected nothing, feared nothing. The darkness of the night fed his desires, since not a single star was shining in the sky, and there was not the slightest glimmer to shed any light on this transgression. Erast felt a trembling within. Liza felt the same, not knowing why, not knowing what was happening to her. Ah, Liza, Liza, where is your guardian angel? Where is your innocence? The misdemeanour was over a moment later. Liza could not fathom her emotions, and asked questions in her bewilderment. Erast said nothing. He searched for the right words, but did not find them. "Oh, I am afraid," said Liza. "I am afraid of what has happened to us. I felt as if I was dying, and that my soul— No, I do not know how to say it. Why are you so quiet, Erast? Why are you sighing? Oh, my goodness, what is happening?" Meanwhile, lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. Liza was shaking all over. "Erast, Erast," she said, "I am frightened. I am afraid that the thunder might kill me for my crimes." The storm raged menacingly. Rain poured from black clouds, and it seemed as if nature was lamenting Liza's lost innocence. Erast attempted to calm Liza and took her back home. Tears streamed from her eyes as she bade him farewell. "Oh, Erast, tell me that we will be as happy as we were before." "We will, Liza, we will," he replied. "Please God, I cannot believe what you say, even though I love you. But in my heart— Enough, forgive me. Tomorrow we will see each other again." They continued to meet each other, But everything had changed so much. Erast was no longer content with Liza's innocent caresses alone, with her loving eyes, the touch of her hands, her kisses and her pure embraces. He wanted more and more, until there was nothing else to want. Anyone who knows his own heart and who has contemplated the delicate nature of his own pleasure will, of course, agree with me that the fulfilment of all desires is the most perilous temptation of love. To Erast, Liza was no longer the immaculate angel who had fired his imagination and delighted his soul. Platonic love had given way to certain feelings in which he could take no pride, but which were not new to him. As for Liza, having given herself to him completely, she lived and breathed like a lamb, always obedient to his will and finding her own happiness in his pleasure. She noticed a change in him, and often told him, "You were happier before. We used to be more at ease and contented, and I was not afraid that I might lose your love." Sometimes, as he bade her farewell, he would say, "Tomorrow, Liza, I cannot meet you. An important matter has arisen." And Liza would sigh every time he uttered these words. Eventually, she went 5 days without seeing him, and she was greatly perturbed. On the 6th day he arrived with a forlorn expression and told her, "Dearest Liza, I must say goodbye to you for a while. As you know, we are at war, and the regiment to which I belong is going on a campaign." Liza turned pale and almost fainted. Erast caressed her, declaring that he would always love his darling Liza, and that upon his return he hoped they would never be parted again. She was silent for a long time. Then, her eyes streaming with bitter tears, she clutched his hand, glanced at him with all the tenderness of love, and asked, "Can you really not stay?" "I could," he replied, "but only with the greatest disgrace. My honour would be severely blemished. Everyone would despise me and disdain me as a coward and an unworthy son of the fatherland." "Well, in that case," said Liza, "you must go. Go wherever God commands. But you could be killed." "To die for one's country is not terrible, dearest Liza." "If you leave this world, then I shall die at once." "Why give that any thought? I hope to remain alive and return to you, my dearest." Please God, I will pray for that every hour of every day. Oh, if only I could read and write. Then you could tell me about everything that happens to you, and I could write to you about my tears." "No, look after yourself, Liza. Take care of yourself for the sake of your beloved. I do not want you to cry over me." "You are so cruel. Do you mean to deny me that comfort?" "No, when I am parted from you, I will only stop crying when my heart runs dry." "Think of the wonderful moment when we will see each other again." I will think about that. Oh, if only it could come quickly. My dearest, darling Erast, remember your poor Liza, who loves you more than herself." Alas, I cannot describe everything that they talked about on this occasion. The next day was to be their last meeting. Erast wanted to say goodbye to Liza's mother, who could not hold back her tears upon hearing that her kind, comely gentleman must go off to war. He urged her to take some money from him, saying, "While I am away, I do not want Liza to sell any of her handiwork, which by agreement belongs to me." The old woman showered him with blessings. "Please God," she said, "you will return to us safely, and I will see you again in this life. Perhaps by that time Liza will have found herself a suitable husband. How I would thank the Lord if you could join us for the wedding. When Liza has children, you must be godfather to them, sir. Oh, I really do hope I live to see that day." Liza stood beside her mother, not daring to look at her. The reader can easily imagine what she was feeling at that moment. But what must she have felt when Erast embraced her and clutched her to his breast for the last time, saying, "Forgive me, Liza." What a moving scene! The glow of dawn, like a sea of scarlet, flooded the eastern sky. Erast stood beneath the branches of the tall oak tree, his pale, grief-stricken companion languishing in his arms, bidding farewell not only to him, but also to her heart. All of nature fell silent. Liza sobbed. Eras wept. He let go of her. She fell onto her knees, raised her arms heavenwards, and watched as Erast went away, further and further, until at last he disappeared from view. The sun began to shine, and poor abandoned Liza took leave of her senses and her mind. When she came round, the world itself seemed desolate and mournful. All the delights of nature had been hidden from her, along with the love of her heart. Ah, she thought, why am I left behind in this wilderness? What is preventing me from hastening after my dear Erast? War does not frighten me. My only fear is being wherever my beloved is not. I want to live with him and die with him, or let my death save his precious life. Wait, wait, my darling, I will fly to you. She was ready to run after Erast, but one thought prevented her. I have a mother, Liza sighed, and bowing her head, walked back to the hut, treading softly. From that moment onwards, her days were spent in grief and yearning, which she had to conceal from her dear mother, although this merely made her heart suffer all the more. The only relief came when Liza retreated into the depths of the forest, where she could freely shed her tears and lament her separation from her beloved. The melancholy turtle-dove often joined its own plaintive voice to her wailing. Sometimes, though, albeit extremely rarely, a golden ray of hope and comfort shone through the darkness of her sorrow. When he returns to me, I will be so happy. Everything will change. These thoughts brightened her eyes and refreshed the rosiness of her cheeks, and Liza would smile like a May morning after a stormy night. About 2 months passed in this way. One day Liza had to go to Moscow to buy some rose water to soothe her mother's eyes. On one of the main streets she came across a grand carriage, and inside it she spotted Erast. "Oh!" Liza cried out, and then rushed towards him, but the carriage passed by and turned into a courtyard. Erast got out and was heading towards the porch of the large house, when he suddenly found himself in Liza's arms. He turned pale. Then, without uttering a single word in response to her exclamation, he took her by the hand, led her into his study, locked the door, and said to her, "Liza, circumstances have changed. I am engaged to be married. You must leave me in peace and forget me for your own peace of mind. I loved you, and I still love you now. That is, I wish you well. Here are 100 roubles. Take them." He put the money in her pocket. "Let me kiss you one last time, and then you must go home." Before Liza had chance to recover her senses, he had led her out of the study and instructed his servant to escort this girl out of the courtyard. At this point, my heart is bleeding. I am beginning to forget the human being inside Erast, and am ready to curse him, but my tongue will not move. I look up at the sky, and a tear rolls down my face. Oh, why am I writing this sad, true story and not a novel? So, had Erast deceived Liza by telling her that he was going away with the army? No, he really was in the army, but instead of fighting the enemy, he had played cards and gambled away almost all of his estate. Peace was soon declared, and Erast returned to Moscow, burdened with debt. There was only one way to improve his circumstances: to marry the rich older widow who had been in love with him for a long time. He resolved to do that, and went to live in her house, heaving a genuine sigh for his Liza. But does all of that justify his actions? Liza found herself on the street in such a state that no pen can describe. Has he spurned me? Does he love someone else? All is lost. These were her thoughts and feelings. A severe fainting fit interrupted them temporarily. A kind woman who was passing by stopped and stood over Liza as she lay on the ground, and tried to revive her. The poor girl opened her eyes, and the kind woman helped her back onto her feet. Then she thanked the woman and walked on, not knowing where she was going. I cannot live, thought Liza. I cannot. Oh, if only the sky would fall down on me, if only the earth would swallow me up, wretched as I am. Alas, the sky will not fall and the earth will not give way. Woe is me! She left the city and found herself at the edge of the deep pond, under the shade of those same ancient oaks which a few weeks earlier had been silent witnesses to her rapture. This memory shook her soul to the core. The most terrible, heartfelt suffering was evident on her face. For a few moments, though, she was lost in thought. She glanced around, spied her neighbour's daughter, a 15-year-old girl, walking along the road, and calling out to her, pulled the 10 gold coins from her pocket and gave them to the girl, saying, "Anyuta, my dear friend, take this money to my mother. It is not stolen. And tell her that Liza has sinned against her. Tell her that I concealed from her my love for a certain cruel man. Does she really need to know his name? Tell her that he betrayed me, and ask her to forgive me, God help her. Kiss her hand just as I am kissing yours now. Tell her that poor Liza told you to kiss her. Tell her that I—" With that she threw herself into the water. Anyuta screamed and burst into tears, but could not save her, so she ran to the village. A group of people gathered and pulled Liza out, but she was already dead. Thus ended the life of one who was beautiful in body and soul. When we see each other in the next new life, I will recognize you, sweet Liza. She was buried near the pond, beneath that sombre oak, and a wooden cross was placed on her grave. I often sit there with my thoughts, leaning on the tomb where Liza is laid to rest, the pond rippling before my eyes and the leaves rustling above me. When Liza's mother heard of her daughter's terrible death, her blood ran cold and her eyes closed forever. The hut was left deserted. Inside it, the wind howls, and when the superstitious villagers hear the sound at night, they say, "The dead girl is moaning. Poor Liza is moaning." Erast was unhappy for the rest of his days. When he learned of Liza's fate, he was inconsolable and considered himself a murderer. I met him a year before he died. He himself told me this story and took me to Liza's grave. Now, perhaps, they are reconciled at last.